Welcome back to the show. Thanks to Dr. Lee Bell, Jim Williams, Dr. Wilmer J. Leon. Got some hype. Boy, I don't know what the hype music coming on. We got Andrew Dixon here. He is a soccer writer and analyst, an NBA writer, and I don't know, Andrew. That's a bad little joint coming on for you, man. I mean, get a little hype thing going on.
Yeah, brought that Ja Rule back from from like a good 10 years ago. So.
See, only Andrew Dixon would know that was Ja Rule living it up from back in the day. Only him would know hip hop and soccer and basketball doing it. Barry, I see you. Andrew, I appreciate you. Happy New Year to you, sir. I wanted to start with soccer, and when you look at some of the controversy we've had, I don't want to deal with the negative, but let's start with the positive. And one of the positives I wanted to talk about, and I actually, this was an email, and I was going to bring it up anyway, and I say it's a positive, is that women, the soccer field and women, and their quests and their requests and their push for equal monies as relates to what they do, especially, Andrew, and we talked about this, when you look at the women in the Olympics and the women on the World Cup stage and what they've done, there's no question. I mean, the WNBA we talked about before, but there's no question that soccer, especially on the North American, the American side of things, would not be where it is if it wasn't for the women's side of what they've done and what they've accomplished. So would that be a positive story? And if so, where do you see it going? Can they fight and gain equality in terms of resources and salaries at this point?
Yeah, without a doubt, what the women have accomplished over the last 8 years is most definitely a positive. And talking about the American women, first of all, to even have those type of conversations about equality and being paid amount, and getting the same type of backing and sponsorship, that doesn't happen unless there's excellence on the field. And the excellence that they showed over the last couple of World Cups, especially this one. This one that happened earlier this year. They went through the host France. They went through some very solid teams in the knockout stages to win their second World Cup. And you saw a lot of different people stepping up. Most especially when Megan Rapinoe went down. I think it was in the semifinal match. And then Kristen Press comes in. Remember who Carly Lloyd, who she was the FIFA Women's Player of the Year back in 2015 when they won the World Cup. She was more or less a big player on this team. When you had people like Rose Lavelle, you had people like Julie Ertz, of course, what Megan Rapinoe did, Alex Morgan. I mean, all of these players who they really demonstrated their excellence and just showed how deep the United States was. Let's put away the first game against Thailand where they beat them 13-0 or whatever it was. They got progressively better. All right, they threw the marker down in that beginning in that first match, but they got progressively better. They got progressively more cohesive as a unit. When people had to go out for injuries, they were able to bring people in. It was just the excellence on the field, which really should be the number one story when it comes to the women's team over the last 8 years.
But
now,
Andrew, the only question. I was going to say the only thing with the Thailand thing is that a lot of people, this sexual part of it, in terms of genders, is that they were too arrogant and they stepped on throats that they didn't have to. They were very kind of pompous and kind of like they beat teams more than they should have. All of this kind of came out sexist-wise when the men do it all the time in every sport, not just men's soccer. They do it all the time. You got a chance to beat a team in soccer 6-0, and you dominate. Andrew, 6-0 in soccer is like winning in the Super Bowl 35-0. Like you're doing what you're supposed to do. You're beating your opponent. But when the women do it, all of a sudden they're being, overly, dominant, and they're showing compassion, and they're not showing sportsmanship. Talk about that as well, because that played into a lot of what they went to.
Right. Exactly, and I wrote about this. My issue with that wasn't so much the score line. I mean, you go in there, you don't go in there just to, take your foot off. No, you go in. Anybody wants to score in a World Cup. I think what my issue was some of the issues of some of the people was the excessive celebrations when you're up, 9 and 10 and 11 goals on a team that you're supposed to beat handily, when you're doing the swag surfing and, the crazy celebrations when you're up by 13 goals on a team that you're supposed to be, that's when it got a bit much.
But I mean, guys
wrote
do
about
that,
this.
Andrew. Guys do
well,
that.
No.
Andrew.
See,
Tom Brady will beat the
here's,
Dolphins, and by the way, he lost to the Dolphins. But Tom Brady will beat the Dolphins and pump his fist, and they'll be up 28-3. I mean, what's the difference between men and women doing the same thing?
I understand that. I understand what you're saying. Here's the thing, though. I wrote about that very topic. Okay. Now, the United States, when they beat Thailand 13-0, they beat they broke the record that Germany had when they played. I think it was Argentina in, I want to say, like the 2009 World Cup. I think that's when it was. Or 2011. But my issue is that as you watch the films, the celebrations got less and less. As they were piling on they didn't stop playing, but the celebrations got less and less. Germany, when they beat Saudi Arabia 8-0 in the 2002 World Cup, again, the first couple goals, yes, it was like, okay, yeah, we're scoring, and then when you get out to 6-7-0, just like, okay, yeah, I got another goal, that's great, let's go, let's keep it moving. I think that was the issue. I didn't have a problem with them continuing to score. That's the name of the game. You're supposed to be able to score, and when you're a favorite, you got to lay down markers like that. So I had absolutely no problem with them running up the scoreline. My biggest issue, and some of the other issues that other people had, was okay, you're up 10 goals. You don't need to swag surf. Okay, that's a bit nuts. But that doesn't take away from what they did and throughout this tournament. And what was your original part of your question was that the excellence that they showed throughout that allowed everybody to have the greater conversation about, yes, if they're showing how good they are on the field, then they need to be paid in a measure commensurate with what the quality is that they're showing on the field. Okay. And it wasn't so much, and beyond that, everybody was talking about that, whether positive or negative. They really became the team of the year in my view. You had the president tweeting about them. You had celebrities tweeting about them. I had people on, my Facebook page, left and, either on the right side of the political spectrum, on the left side, just them they're having this conversation about women's soccer. All right. First of all, women's sports in the United States, it gets the short shrift anyway, unfortunately. And you talk about soccer, which obviously is like, fourth or fifth or sixth down the line in, the American sports, consciousness. So for them to be, to be such a talking point, throughout the entire summer and going in, and who did you see was the Sports Illustrated Player of the Year, Athlete of the Year? It was Megan Rapinoe, and it brought back all those conversations again. So I think just the impact that team had, both on the field, both off the field, as just a cultural phenomenon with people really cheering for them and or people they were cheering against them because of what they perceived to be representing. I think it was an amazing story, and it's certainly one of the positives in terms of soccer for 2019.
Just to follow up with that, though, when you look at Rufino and then you look at the women's soccer, where are they in terms of their evolution? Where are they going? Because I still see women's soccer, just like other women's sports, like the WNBA, where they got to go overseas to make money. And let me backtrack. In terms of women soccer here in North America, right? So they got to go other places to not only get the exposure, which means that there's a monetary aspect of that, but the respect. It's almost like HBCUs in a general sense, and you know what HBCUs are. So, where are they in terms of moving forward? In your opinion, Andrew, moving forward in 2020, because they clearly, like you said, not just forget the men's side of soccer. Soccer
Right.
in general has been on the map in a positive way in terms of winning, in terms of is specifically North American, that the United States, that they've done really well, and it's because of women doing what they've done, and
Right.
the excitement, and the balance, and the fact that there's some really good play, by the way, people don't give credit to, really good play on the women's side of things, that they don't get the credit that they deserve.
Yeah, and it comes to a bigger point about how women's athletics is portrayed and how it's accepted, even by women. I've had conversations with women. They said, like, I just don't watch it. It's just not as exciting. Women
Right.
sports fans. They said it's just
Right.
not as exciting. I mean, I saw it even when I was in college. I mean, when I was in college at George Washington University in the mid '90s, our team was ranked as high as sixth my senior year. But there was still, as they say, good seats still available if you're just driving around the arena, because it just certainly wasn't as filled as the men's teams were. And that's just a general thing. Another aspect, of course, also is how to translate the international appeal, or the international success that a national team has to the domestic league, and you see that with the men's team as well.
Right.
As much as we're talking about the women, the first half of this past decade, we saw the United States get into the round of 16 at two straight World Cups.
Right.
And we had that epic match against Belgium where we almost came back with almost pulled that comeback, and the match where Tim Howard made, I think it was 14 saves to break the record. How many people were talking about that, But then
Right.
How do you translate that back to MLS? And that's just been one of those questions that continues to I guess kind of boggle the mind of soccer experts and soccer media. But again, it's just one of those things that, and I've said this time and time again, that nothing in soccer, how to make it more popular, is a quick fix. It's just one of those things that just continue to take time, as the NBA did, back in the 70s and 80s, and we've talked about that, oftentimes on this show. And I was talking with, I was actually out playing pickup with somebody today who actually played in which was the top league before MLS got started. And we were both saying, it's amazing how much the game has progressed in the last, 24 years, the way it's progressed in this country. So, we're going to have to keep having these conversations. How do you, not just on the women's side, but how in soccer generally, how do you continue to bring that interest that people have in the national team, whether it's the men's or the women's team, and bring it to the domestic leagues, okay? Because we've already had one women's league fold. They've started another one back up, and a lot of the top players are still playing with it. But as you mentioned, a lot of them also go overseas and play. Like Crystal Dunn played for Chelsea for a very long, for like a couple of seasons, I think, and obviously helped her game because she was a tremendous part of what the women did this past summer. So again, it's just a conversation we're going to continue to have over the years, and we'll have to look at it again in another 5 years and see where we are.
Yeah, and we'll those are the conversations we'll continue to have, not in 5 years, but like having you on. Like, we see in the NBA, women's coaches, and in the NFL and women's referees. Well, why not have a woman playing in the English league or whatever? And so those are the conversations we'll have. I want to ask you this, though. We'll talk with Andrew Dixon here on the Bachelor News radio show. One of the things that I've learned from you, Andrew, over the years is that you can turn on a game and get the excitement, but one of the concerns I have is that you don't get the understanding. And one of the, I've learned, for me personally, just watching. I can watch the English Premier League, I can watch MLS, and I can see the excitement and everybody going on. But it's almost like hockey, where if they dump the puck into the zone, like what is the difference between what happens with a penalty shot and not? And I think that's one of the concerns. Do you have any concerns of how soccer is explained to the pedestrian, especially forget the FIFA Cup and everything else. When you get to the big one, just following it as a pedestrian, just turning on your cable channel, like I have six different Premier Leagues on my channel, and I can watch it. But do you have a concern of how they explain a game, or do they just explain it and you just that you understand they just understand that people who follow it or somebody who's watching it with somebody who understands it explains it, or do you want them to explain it even better?
I think if you ask a lot of soccer announcers that have American audiences, I think you will find that they have gone back and forth on these things. For example, you'll find during some of the World Cup matches that they'll do a lot more explaining of certain rules because they realize they're probably getting casual fans
They do.
To watch these matches. You're not going to necessarily have that during some of the league matches in MLS, like in England or watching. I watch the Spanish league on BN Sports, which I know is not widely available. Just happens to be on because I have Dish Network.
And I have it. I have it.
Yeah.
I can't understand what they're saying, but I do watch it. I have the Spanish league too. So go ahead.
Oh yeah, well, you can watch some of the Mexican leagues as well. But I think what's interesting is that it depends on the tournament. I think some of the bigger international tournaments, some of like maybe even the Champions League, you'll probably see a little more. You'll probably see a little more explanation of certain scenarios, especially if you're in a knockout stage match and you have a tie that's looming at the end of the game, then they'll start talking about, hey, look, there may be 30 minutes more and possibly penalty shootouts. That's something every soccer fan already knows. But like if it's someone who isn't as well versed in the game, they will that's something they want to be able to tell them about. Same thing I think with the offside rule, which is probably one of the hotly debated rules, especially now we got the VAR. That how what is that line that going to determine whether someone's offside or onside. I think you're seeing it a little bit more now with the VAR that there's a little more explanation of some of these rules. When is a foul going to call back a goal, or whether it's a handball or something like that that's going to negate the build-up for an actual goal that happens. So I think with the introduction of VAR, which has been controversial, especially depending on what country you're from, you'll see a little bit more of it. But I think most soccer announcers, for the most part, are getting away from saying, hey, look, let me explain every rule, let me explain every nuance, as to, what's going on in the game. We're just going to call the game. The analysts, the color commentator, they're going to say what they have to say, and people are just going to have to kind of catch up. I think in league play, you're not going to see as much as those type of explanations. Yeah, I think you'll see it more in like big tournaments like Copa Libertadores or Champions League or European championships are coming back next year, and looking forward towards the World Cup in 2022.
But I would think though, it's just playing advocate. If in North America, in the world, soccer, football, that version of football is popular, but you have the NFL, you have the NBA and stuff like that. So
yep.
People here watching in the States here are going to watch, and I come across male and female that don't know the rules of the game, the NFL, NBA. But because it's so popular in terms of having a Super Bowl party or watching the NBA finals, that people are deemed quick to tell people what's going on there than they are in the beautiful sport, as you call it, in soccer. So isn't it more important because you're not on that level in certain parts of the world, certainly overall, but in certain parts of the world, you're not on the same level in terms of people wanting to watch the pedestrians that just turn it on like, oh, this is pretty cool, what's going on, that you explain it, as opposed to you explaining fourth down on the 26 in NFL, or it's
punt
it's a
situations.
free throw that right. Yeah, it's just
Right.
different with the NFL and NBA, Major League Baseball or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, and there is something to that. I mean, I remember on a message board a few years ago, someone, his brother, he had walked in, he was in a barber shop, was waiting to get his hair cut, and they were kind of turning the game. I think it was an MLS game, and they were
Right.
watching it, but they didn't understand, okay, so, obviously that you don't see lines, you don't see what they're trying to gain. Obviously, you're
Right.
trying to make a goal, but you don't understand, the types of formations. Now, I would tell you, like, I'd have no idea what, I'm still trying to figure out what a 4-6 is in football. What's the, pistol formation as opposed to shotgun. I mean, all this stuff. I
Right.
mean, it's just because I'm just not a major football fan. And people just say, oh, it's a, you've got that pistol formation. I'm like, okay, whatever that is, they're just gonna run the play, see what happens. But so and again, it was the same thing. This brother was saying, it's like, they didn't understand exactly what the strategy was. They realized that there are certain things that they're trying to do in terms of moving the ball forward or how they're defending, but they didn't understand it because it wasn't something that was constantly explained by the announcers. So there is something to what you're saying, and I think if you ask any full-time soccer announcer, that probably get a couple of different opinions on how they go about that when they know they have a primarily American audience that may not be as well versed in the game as, like, say, I am.
Yeah, and just to your point, 4th and 6 is you already know, but you already know that it takes 4 downs to get a first down. So 4th and 6 with a formation is different than if you see some great players moving the ball with their feet. And soccer is a beautiful thing. And so that's only I bring that up. It's a beautiful, the motion of it and the fact, the skill set of it, it needs to be interpreted a little bit more, because it's not about, like, you understand what a three-pointer is in basketball. You understand what a touchdown is in football, and you understand what offsides is in football. Some people may not know why is it offsides in soccer. That's the only bring it up. It's just a beautiful game, but people want to understand it so they can and gravitate to it more. That's the only reason I brought that up. It's
a legit point. I mean, I've had to, and I said it's a legit point. I mean, and I've had to like set things up on a table to explain the offside rule to my dad. He's like, "Oh, okay, I get it now." So, not everybody has that soccer fan in their family, or they can just ask and say, "Hey, can you explain why this was an indirect free kick as opposed to a free kick?" So there's something to that.
And I think the biggest, when you look at the Messis and people like that, and you see they're making top-notch money, you see what they're doing, you see the highlights and stuff, you say, wow, that was a great kick. But you don't understand what went into the skill set of all of that. They're being one of the athletes, the top athletes on the planet. You have to understand that, and that's the point I was trying to make. So when I'm looking at the leagues, when you look at the leagues now, what are some of the positives and some of the negatives internationally? Because the MLS is one thing, but nationally and internationally, that you would want to change, and some of the things that you think are going in the right direction.
I think the positives that you see are, first of all, you get, especially from a soccer fan perspective, there's so many more games that are available to a soccer fan now than they were, like, say, even 10, 15 years ago. You got a lot more opportunities to see games on a weekly basis, and to see, your favorite players. You can see your Messis, you can see your Ronaldos, you can see, your Luis Suarez, if, you like vampires like that. You can see, all these type players. You can see all these top players that, that are just, see them, what they do on a day-to-day basis. I love seeing the quality. I love seeing that you're seeing a lot more black players on on these teams that are in these European leagues that are starting to make command that top money, like your Kylian Mbappe's and your Paul Pogba's. To see the skill that they have, and even when they don't play well, you see how people are upset about it because they know what they're capable of. And so seeing a lot of these young black talent coming through the ranks of some of these teams and representing on national teams that you never would ever thought of, maybe 20, 25 years ago. Who would have thought, Italy would have a black player or Germany would have black players, England's always had, well, not always, but, England's had, a fair amount of black players, but, to see, so many of these young black kids getting a chance to represent the countries that, that they've grown up in, and on top of that, some of them that are that have grown up in these countries, but are still going back and representing the African teams of their families. So just seeing the greater opportunity for a lot of these black players is a positive thing. If I have to go with a negative thing, this is something that's just continued to happen over the last decade. Really, continue seeing these racist incidents in these stadiums that continue to happen, especially in Italy. You see it in Spain. He had one at the Tottenham Chelsea match, I think, last week, but continuously in Italy, and that. This is something this is continuing to happen. You have, big name players, big name coaches that are speaking out on it, but you see so much excuse making. For example, when Romelu Lukaku, who was playing at Manchester United, moved to Inter Milan, he was hearing some of those monkey chants and things like that. And he was amazed that so many people from his team, so many fans of his team for Inter Milan were explaining it. We're trying to explain it away,
Right.
And then when they played AS Roma, who has another former Manchester United fan. He's actually on loan, Chris Smalling, who's actually playing on loan for AS Roma. So when they were playing on the weekend after our Thanksgiving, when the big sporting newspapers in Italy had a picture of Lukaku, had a picture of Smalling as a preview of the match and called it Black Friday. Like, what are you doing? Why are you continuing to talk this kind of stuff up? Why couldn't it just be, you got two, well-known players and two, well-known clubs in Italy that are about to, converge and play a big match. So this continued racism stuff that, obviously, a friend of mine posted on my Facebook page. He said, oftentimes sports is, a reflection of what society is, and society is just not always in a good place right now. And
that's
you're seeing
right.
You're seeing a real resurgence of it, especially in countries like Italy, countries like Spain, where you continually had this type of stuff. And to see it come back in England, where England has really, done a major major efforts, try to eliminate that stuff. To see that come back in a Chelsea Tottenham match, it was kind of surprising. But I also got to love the fact that these black players, they're not taking it anymore. They're walking off. They are actually walking off the fields, because they feel like, I don't need to experience this while I'm playing this game. I'm at work and you're racially abusing me. No, we're not having that. And so you're starting to see a lot of these black players standing up. They're speaking out about it. Paul Pogba from Manchester United, before their last match, was handing out wristbands to all the Manchester United fans that were in attendance, saying kick it out, we're saying no to racism, that type of thing. So I think that's probably one of the biggest negatives. I think one other thing I want to mention, and I think, is that the amount of games that these players have to play, especially if you're at a top level where you're playing, if you're playing in the Champions League, or your team is at least in the Europa League, so you're playing 3 matches a week. And then you play, if you're good enough to represent your national team, then you're jetting off and playing, thousands of miles to go represent your country, especially if it's on another continent. And so the amount of games that these players play, I mean, I know that a lot of them are taking much better care of their bodies and they're fit and everything else, but, that wear and tear is just something that you worry about. But, these clubs, they're making money off of, the amount of games and these TV contracts, and, people want want to see these top players play. So when you talk about seeing, what's been a topic of conversation in the NBA about load management, you never really see that so whole lot in big time international soccer. If you're a big time player, you're expected to be out there on the pitch, getting it in and getting stuck
right.
in, and it's you just wonder how much some of these players can take, which then again speaks to the amazing quality of Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi. I mean, they've been going back and forth about who's the better player for like 12 years now. That these two guys are the conversation about who's the best player in the world. And so it just speaks to their quality and the way they take care of themselves. Considering the amount of games that they play, not just for their club teams but internationally as well.
Well, I will say that what you said in terms of the positive and the negatives, I have sort of in between. I mean, you look at Ito in Milan, and one of the best strikers. I mean, Tim Howard, what he did with the U.S. team, Freddie Adu and Kobe Jones and Zardes and Jermaine Jones and Timothy Way and some of the people of color that have really been very good and impactful. I think that we need to have more people, like a Tim Howard that can be a goalie and be vocal and be very, very good. Because if you're good, they're going to listen. If you're not good, they're not going to listen. That's just sports in general. So if you're good, they'll listen. Freddie Adu, right? So if you're good, they'll listen. But not only that, when they listen, we have to take that position. We have to be very, very vocal, like you said. We have to be able to step out, and we can't allow England and Spain and Italy and some of them to make excuses for the racism that comes down. So I applaud you on what you're saying and what you're doing and those who are trying to do that. It's really important. I do want to get your thoughts early on the NBA season. Your Miami team is very, very good. Lights out at home. Very good, exceptional on the road. Very surprising to a lot of people that thought that they might take a step back, but they're playing really well. You look at Milwaukee, who seems to be the cream of the crop in the Eastern Conference, and Boston and Philly right there, Toronto certainly. And then out west, you got the two LA teams, and you have a Houston team that can score a lot of points that we don't know how they defend. But certainly the two LA teams are there. Golden State is going to take a considerable step back with all the injuries and things that's going on with them. Assess what you see in the East and the West right now in the NBA.
I think it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously Milwaukee is, as you say, they're probably the top team in the East. They've got a legit shot to come out of the East in the NBA Finals this year. It's going to be interesting to see if Giannis Antetokounmpo is able to steadily knock down outside jump shots, because I'm noticing that teams are starting to play off of him. And I think there was this one game, I think it was earlier this week, where they were just letting him shoot from, 18 to 20 feet out and beyond, and he was bricking every last one of them. And so if he adds that to his game, and that's going to be tough to do in season, that's usually something you do during the off season. But if he's able to add that, he's going to make it Milwaukee's going to be very difficult to beat, because everything else that he brings, and you add Chris Middleton in there, and so they've got a solid team. I want to see what happens, how Boston, with the introduction of Kemba Walker into that lineup. I want to see how they gel as we get in towards March and February, late in February, into March and into April, to see what kind of rhythm that team is in, because they've got some quality players on that team. And I think whatever the drama was with Kyrie Irving over the last year kind of overshadowed everything that was going on with them. But I think Jason Tatum is kind of taking his game up to another level after sort of a sophomore slump. They still got Gordon, who they got from Utah. Yeah, Gordon Hayward, right. And Kemba Walker is, he's still a fantastic player, and I think he's still starting to find a little groove and get used to, what's expected from him in Boston. So I want to see how they do. And, you didn't even mention Philadelphia, even though they lost Jimmy Butler. I mean, they're still.
I was going to Jimmy Butler's made Miami really good, but I'm a Sixer guy, so, I'm looking for, this point guard to get better. You're talking about being able to make shots in the midst of a season, or get traded.
Right.
Really, in my opinion, you have a bona fide center, and you have depth on the bench. I'm not sold on that coaching staff. But what say you about the Sixer team? I'm a huge Sixer fan, so what say you about the Sixers?
Yeah, and I think you mentioned, and then there was really talk about how dominant Joel Embiid can really be. How
right.
dominant does he want to be? He says he wants to be, he wants to be like Defensive Player of the Year. He's got that capability. Does he, but does he have that kind of killer instinct that, maybe a Shaquille O'Neal had between 2000, 2003, 2004? I mean, have that type of impact, from the low post. I think he's the one that was really going to carry this team. And if he, really turns into not just a really good player, but a dominant player, someone that's going to give you 28 and 15 and maybe 4 blocks every game, then he's going to be he's the one that's really going to take Philadelphia very far. He did everything he could on that Kawhi Leonard shot at the end.
My God!
He put everything out on that in that series. And there was you saw in the aftermath of that Marc Gasol, after he put his hands up, he immediately went over to Joel Embiid and just saying, hey, really to kind of congratulate him on really what was a fantastic series for him. He has that type of capability. It's just, is he ready to put that all together? So it's going to be interesting. I think those are the teams that, you talk about the East, the West, the two LA teams.
Real quick about Toronto. How do you think Toronto, I mean, they've been playing really well without Kawhi.
They're playing well, but
right.
Yeah, they're playing well, but they don't have, they had a game winner in Kawhi Leonard, and you don't replace that. There's a reason why the LA Clippers, are up there, doing work. It's because, obviously Paul George is there too. But I mean, Kawhi Leonard was a game winner. He was, on both sides of the ball, defensively and offensively. He was the one that could really win you a game just, by a certain play or by a certain move, or just being aggressive, going to the basket, or, coming up with a big defensive play. So, you can't replace that. You just absolutely can't replace that. So it doesn't mean they're not going to have a successful season. It doesn't mean they're not going to make a nice run in the playoffs, but I don't know that they're going to get to the, even the last 4 in the East. Certainly, I don't see them making the Eastern Conference Finals. So it just not when you don't replace something like a Kawhi Leonard. I mean, there's just no, unless Drake is going to get out there and he's going to start balling. I just don't see it. But you look out west. I think you mentioned. Right, exactly. I mean, the two LA teams, it's interesting that, that has actually become a rivalry now, and that was something that was, unheard of as long as the Clippers have been in LA, and they've had some decent teams, when they were Lob City or whatever, but this is a legit finals team. You have a legit, 1-2 punch in Leonard and Paul George. And so, there's a really battle for LA right now. My uncle lives out there, and he said LA is a Lakers town, even more than the Dodgers, even more than the Rams. He said it is a Lakers town. But the Clippers, with the success that they've had, and with the with the downtimes towards the end of the Kobe years that the Lakers have had, and even LeBron's first year, Clippers are gaining more fans out there. So, it's going to be interesting to see. Yeah, I would love to see both LA teams playing for the Western Conference Final. That would be something, and we almost had that. In a playoff series. I think it would have been like in the Western Conference semifinals a few years back. But there's a legitimate shot of that happening now. Those two teams meeting in the conference finals. Don't discount, Denver. I don't know that they're ready yet, but they're certainly going to make some noise. Same with Portland. I'm just not. I'm not sold on Houston. I'm not sold on James Harden leading anybody to a championship. If you got to pound the ball between your legs, 5 times every time down the court, I just don't see that.
Right.
And I think Russell Westbrook gives them a different dimension in terms of that defensive, intensity and that defensive presence and being able to turn, defense into offense in a quick, aggressive manner that Russell Westbrook does. But I don't see that team coming out the West. So.
Yeah, and you make a good point because you're being modest actually because Russell he's a gunner. You're not saying that, but you said gives him a different dimension, and that's fine. But
he is that
final.
I'll give you that.
The final thought about how long will it take for Golden State to get back to where they are with the injuries and all that's going on with them?
Yeah, this is going to be kind of a lost season for them, unfortunately. And I know a lot of people are kind of delighting in seeing them being, brought back to earth. I mean, I remember I watched the game with my daughter last week, and it was just who are these guys? That's what it was looking like. So, you lose a Kevin Durant, but you don't have Clay, you don't have Steph. Steph will be probably the first one to come back, but it's not going to be enough to even get them anywhere near the playoffs, I don't think. So it's going to be, obviously this is a rebuilding year, but this is going to be a year for these other players to, really demonstrate to Steve Kerr and that coaching staff, like, look, we're part of, what you want to do next year. If they get a good draft pick, someone that's going to come in and contribute immediately, and, there's always, what happens in free agency, but, they get, you get Clay back and you get Stephen Curry back. I mean, that's 55 points, almost 60 points right there, and you have veterans who know how to win, how to play. So obviously this is a lost season for them, but, they're watching them and seeing what the role players are going to be, what D'Angelo Russell does, what some of these other players are. If they can if they can actually find someone who can actually, kind of really give them a low post presence. I've always thought that's something that they've lacked really since, obviously when you have, those 3 guys, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and Klay Thompson, maybe you don't need someone to really do a whole lot in that center position, but if they can get someone who can really deliver in that 5 spot, they'll be back next year and back in contending, I think.
Well, Draymond Green with all his hustle plays has been fouls this year, so that's another part of it.
I mean, and that's hard for him. I mean, he was not a go-to offensive threat, and every time he cranks up a 3, I'm like, oh, here we go.
Exactly.
It's just not something you want to see if you're a Golden State fan. But that's sports is cyclical. These things happen. You remember there was a down year for the Spurs in between. When Dave Robinson went down, and then they got Tim Duncan, and they were able to kind of reestablish themselves. I mean, any team goes through these things. You go through these, times where you have, just wonderful success, and then you got to go through some lean years. That's just how sports is. I mean, I'm looking with Manchester United. This is, you're talking about one of the most dominant teams in English soccer and European soccer, and we're constantly running, 6th, 5th, 4th. I mean, we're on a nice little run now, but it's just one of those things. And I guess that's what Golden State has to go through now. And it's allowed some of these other teams like Denver and Portland, to come up and see what they're capable of doing.
Well, I was going to say Manchester too. I was going to say Manchester, and it's not just about going through a drought. It's about the great teams that draft and pick that go through droughts. So.
Absolutely.
The Clippers and the Kings have gone through droughts because they had poor management. The Warriors will be back. They'll be fine. They're gonna go through that, and and all of those teams, and like you mentioned, Manchester United. The great franchises who know how to draft and bring people in, they'll be fine. They go through droughts, but they'll be fine. So we'll see what happens. Andrew, appreciate you, man. Be well. Be safe. Thank you, man. God bless. Talk with you on the other side, sir.
All right. Have a great New Year, sir.
You do the same.
All right.
All right. Andrew Dixon talking soccer and NBA. Take a 30-second break. If that, come back and wrap things up with Orlando Hughes of KRSB Radio. I know he's happy right now. His Eagles getting ready to play, I believe, the Seahawks. We'll get into it. Maybe not the Seahawks. I think they play. I forgot who they play. Anyway, they're the fourth seed. They're the NFC East champions. We'll talk about that on the